Hello everyone and welcome back to DMG. Most of the media laptops I look at are from HP. Recently though, I've broken that loop. I've looked at one from Lenovo and a few from Dell, and well, today is another from a non-HP company. But a bit of a bizarre one, a manufacturer that probably would not immediately come to mind as a laptop maker. This is the Samsung R580, Samsung's attempt at making a media laptop, and it's pretty nice. It's got some good hardware in it. I'll be discussing it today, discussing its upsides, its downsides, its left sides and right sides. So let's get right into it. This is the Samsung R580. So first of all, much like the HP Pavilion, they went for a very nice glossy and reflective pattern on the lid. It's hard to catch on camera, but there are small little concentric circles. There's a pattern in the lid, and just like the HP Pavilions, that pattern continues down onto the palm rest and the touchpad and the area around the keyboard. So they've already nailed the looks aspect. This lovely red and black pattern gives it a nice look. I mean, it's a flashy, attractive appearance for a laptop, and Samsung actually used this paint job on several monitors. I have some old LCD monitors with the same paint. But left side is Kensington lock, charging port, VGA, gigabit Ethernet, HDMI, eSATA plus USB 2, USB 2, small express card port. It's not the full-size one, and headphone and mic. On the front there is SD card reader, the small vent that I don't know why it's there. There's the hard drive, and on the right side is the optical drive, which is a Blu-ray drive. It's labeled CD DVD on the bottom there. So I thought it was only CD and DVD, but upon opening it to put in the Windows installation DVD, I saw it has the second laser for Blu-ray. So yeah, DVD rewritable, DVD dual layer, and Blu-ray disc. So it's a quite nice optical drive. Nothing on the back, just a fan vent, which there is also one of on the left side. Well, let's open it up. You've already seen, but look at that. The touchpad, the corners light up. I absolutely love it. Now, I'm typically not a fan of touchpads that blend into the case too much because it is difficult to tell when they end. And that is unfortunately a problem that this laptop also suffers from. The touchpad is textured slightly differently, so it's not like you can't find it at all just from a feeling. But it's not sunken into the case, neither is it raised. But these little lights on the corners really help in determining where the edge of the touchpad is. I think it's a cute little thing, absolutely love it. But while we've got it open, let's look at those stickers really quickly. Windows 7, Core i5, and NVIDIA GeForce with CUDA. So this is a slightly newer laptop than what I look at typically by one generation. It's a first-gen Core i5. I've upgraded mine to an M480. It came with an M450, I believe. But I had a spare M480, popped it in, and it runs great. GeForce, it has a GT310M, which is a card that does not exist. That is technically not that is not a card. You couldn't go out and buy a GT310. It is a rebadge of a GeForce 200 card that probably actually is a rebadge of a 100 or a 9000 or an 800 series card. The GeForce 310M, both its mobile and desktop versions, are identical. They are both the same shader configuration as the GeForce 205M, another OEM card, which has the same shader configuration as the far more popular GT210. So in Essentia, the 310M is an overclocked GeForce 210, and therefore, on paper, it's 20% faster. It's still not an outrageously fast card, but it's reasonably capable. It gets close to the 9400 GT in performance, so far better than you get from Intel integrated graphics, even on the i5 where they were usually better than the Core 2 Duo. It has a little webcam. Of course, we have to test it. It looks okay enough. It's, you know, it's nothing crazy. It is a webcam on a 2010 laptop. Of course, it's not going to be mind-blowingly good, but it's not one of the worst that I've seen, but it is worse than the older HP Pavilions, actually, which offered more than 640 by 480. This is 640 by 480, unfortunately. The speakers I would similarly classify as serviceable. Where's the bass? Where is it? Where did it go? Who took it? These speakers aren't very good. They are absolutely tiny. They're just silly little fellas. They're right under there. And you know what's on the other side of those speakers? The battery. So they don't extend down far into the case. So the drivers themselves are very small, and they also don't have room to resonate because the battery is right under them. And instead of being mounted down in the chassis with a lot of space under them, like the HP Pavilions are, they are just stuck to the bottom side of the enclosure that has the palm rest, the keyboard, the touchpad, etc. So they're stuck to the top side of the laptop, and they don't sound good. That's something that I've found is consistently a miss on every non-HP media-oriented laptop. The Dell Studios, the Dell XPS, now the Samsung R580, although they might have the hardware and a decent screen to, you know, constitute half of the media experience, you're missing a lot without good speakers. And it is a shame because this machine would be so much better off if it just had slightly improved speakers. There is in fact room to put them down on the front. On the front bezel here of the laptop and actually have them resonate more, because there is more empty chassis space that could be used for big speakers down at the bottom. So I would have preferred that, but of course I did not work at Samsung in 2010. I was too busy learning to speak English and crawling around on the floor, so I must instead criticize in retrospect. Well, here's that GT310M, sub-vendor of Samsung, of course. It's based on the GT218 die, 16 shaders, 4 ROPs, 8 TMUs. It runs at PCIe 1.1. It has DDR3 memory. Would have been better off with GDDR3, of course. Bandwidth of 64-bit memory bus width. So again, GDDR memory would have benefited it, but it's still so much faster with its own GDDR than it would be if it had to go through the north bridge of the CPU to access shared system memory. So that is an obvious advantage of discrete graphics. This is an LED backlight, unfortunately. I do prefer LCD cold cathode screens, and well, you might be able to see why in my videos. Early LED backlights especially, they look blue and unnatural and washed out, and this is far from the worst I've seen, but it is still noticeably less colorful and less color accurate than the lovely backlights on the HP Pavilions. We will plug it into power for these subsequent tests because the first i5 era, like, following the Core 2 Duo, that is really when the power plans started to be a thing in laptops. So that's when more power regulation really started to come into play. So in simple terms, this laptop is a good deal faster plugged in than it is on battery, while most Core 2 Duo laptops actually don't do that. they always clock up to their highest CPU speeds and their highest GPU speeds, regardless of whether plugged in or on battery, but this laptop does not do the same. So what makes this so much faster than the GeForce 210 is its 625 megahertz clock. The GeForce 210 is clocked somewhere in the low 500s, if I recall correctly. I still prefer a 1280 by 800 over 1366 by 768 because I like the 16 by 10 aspect ratio. I find it better, of course not for multimedia, which is mostly 16 by 9, but I find 16 by 10 to be best for general use. Like, you can see more of a web page without scrolling, that sort of thing. But regardless of my yapping about my favorite screen size, this is running absolutely wonderfully. Again, this is 1366 by 768. Yeah. I mean, what can I say? It's running quite well. Very great performance. If I could, like, hit someone, that would be nice. Not myself. I mean, what can I say? This is excellent. Oh, that was nice. Yeah, I mean, it's running absolutely wonderfully. Again, this is the second highest graphics setting, so this is actually closer to GeForce 9600 performance that I'm squeezing out of this fellow right now. And I have a feeling the higher clocked CPU absolutely does have something to do with that. Of course, Core 2 Duos are fast enough for Blur, but always a higher clocked processor would benefit. And of course, the i5 is hyper-threaded, so you're getting 2 cores, 4 threads. So let's see how... Oh, there's the first one. How bad it is here. It has to do, I believe, with loading assets into VRAM. And we're probably not far off from filling up that 512 megs, but cards with more memory tend to lag a little bit less. It seems regardless of the speed of the graphics card. Like, you know, clock speed, that sort of thing. It just needs the VRAM, and cards with a wider memory bus and, oh god, and more VRAM do better on this map. So it seems 512 megabytes is enough to overcome some of the worse laggies that this level has to offer. I mean, it's running fine-ish, except for when those lag spikes hit, but I mean, generally this looks like a solid 50, 60 frames a second, except for those 1% lows that dip it. Yeah, I mean, it couldn't be running any better, really. This is one of the best performing Icetomb runs I've ever seen from a laptop. Yeah, it's running absolutely wonderfully. If you haven't caught my other 874 videos in which I have talked about Icetomb, it is demanding because of those dynamic reflections on the ice, and the whole level is ice, so it is heavy on the graphics card. Not seeing any of the weird artifacts that sometimes show up on the smoke, like the animation runs too fast or that sort of thing, that is... Whenever I've seen it happen, it's always been on an ATI card, and I think once on an Intel, so it is more driver related than, you know, actual card. Oh god, oh boy, oh man, oh god. Sweet. This is running quite well. Again, this is an overclocked GeForce 210, essentially. So I'm a little surprised, actually, that it is handling itself so well. But this is running absolutely wonderfully. Getting some weird flashing. I can't be the only one seeing that. In the sky, there's some wonky flashing, and the map was flashing as well. And look, we're getting visual tearing. I intentionally didn't turn VSync on so we could see if we're getting over 60 frames a second, and we sure are. Consistently. On the default settings that it sent us to, we like high settings, we're getting a great frame rate. Yeah, wow. Well, I bet the water is causing a bit of a frame rate problem, but we're still getting a decent frame rate here. There's a little bit of input lag. Yeah, there's some input lag, but it's not, like, terrible. Oh, Lord. Oh, boy. Oh, are you kidding? Oh, okay, goodbye frame rate. Oh. Well then. Definitely doesn't handle it as well as the GeForce 9800M. That I think, yeah, that was the last video card I tested Saints Row 3 on, I believe. So that's my only reference point. And it doesn't handle as well as the... No, not... Oh, God. Yeah, it definitely doesn't handle as well as the 9800. And especially when there's particle effects, it runs poorly. But again, this is an overclocked goddamn GeForce 210. So I'm not expecting the world's fastest video card. Although, you know, from my commentary, it clearly sounds as though I am. Bonk. Here we go. So it got a little slow there. Yeah, this is worse than the GeForce 8600 because we were running it on slightly higher graphics settings on the 8600. Yeah, I mean, it's running fine. There's some input lag, as mentioned. Of course, aiming down sights, that's a little slow. Again, this is an overclocked GeForce 210. It is doing admirably for what the card is, but in the grand scheme of things, this is still worse than the GeForce 8600. Now, I know I'm doing this a little out of order, but now we're going to test the keyboard, because I do have some closing remarks about the build quality. The keyboard is very thin, doesn't have much travel, and sounds rattly. The keyboard is held onto the chassis not by screws, but with plastic clips that snap it down, and therefore those clips can sometimes come undone, and part of the keyboard raises up above the rest of it, and that can make typing uncomfortable when the keyboard is not all the same height. And that quality complaint goes throughout the entire laptop, unfortunately. The HP Pavilions are plastic, but they are sturdy, well-made plastic. And they all have a metal frame underneath. So there's some metal still holding them together. Even more so with the Dell Studio and XPS, it's a plastic shell over a very sturdy metal frame. Unfortunately, the R580 has no metal to speak of whatsoever. The only metal component is the heatsink and the screws. There's no metal frame, there's no like reinforcements, and that leads to the body of the laptop feeling loose and rattly, and it doesn't give a good feeling of quality. Which is a shame, because it packs some pretty decently nice hardware. It's got the, well, of course, the upgraded i5, and it has the decent GeForce 310 graphics, but due to its poor quality speakers and somewhat flimsy build, I would have an issue with rating this better than an HP Pavilion. Because even though the hardware in the laptop is great, that doesn't quite matter if the laptop itself doesn't stay together. So my overall score for the Samsung R580, I'll give it like a 75%. I love the hardware, not so much a fan of the screen, and not at all a fan of the speakers, and it's such a shame that the build quality is lacking, because that's a very important aspect of a laptop, of course. Though for battery, I will say, it gets significantly more life than a Core 2 Duo due to the i5 being inherently more efficient, as well as the LED backlight also being inherently more efficient. Also, the integrated graphics on the CPU are disabled. The only graphics are the GeForce, so it's not running two graphics cards constantly. That means I get between an hour and a half and 2 hours of battery life of like actual use. That's web browsing, watching videos, that sort of thing. So it's good battery life. So it's just a shame that the areas in which it is a little lacking are some of the most important for a multimedia laptop. But that's going to wrap it up for the Samsung R580. Samsung really did put in effort. They made a really solid contender in the media laptop market, and it's one that I like. I wouldn't have a problem recommending this if you're looking for an older, nice media laptop and you're willing to put up with the sub-optimal screen and subpar speakers. So thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed. As always, I make a lot of videos about laptops, so there are many others if it piques your interest. But that's it for this one, so thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.